feels like very large shoes. It is large shoes, you know what I mean? To like come on stage with Incubus, which is it feels very bass oriented, you know what I mean? All the music and all the parts, and to be asked to do it, to be told that Ben recommended me for it, it's all just kind of a little overwhelming because I feel like I will never, like, from my own eyes, see myself in that ranking with them, just because, I that's just who I am as a person.
We're here at Mohegan Sun Arena with Nicole Row from Incubus on the Morning View Tour. Nicole, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So it's been a pretty big year for you between the tours and recording Morning View 23, working on a new album. What has life been like for you since joining Incubus officially?
Busy. It's been very busy. I came in and just kind of hopped in with them, and we hit the road, and feels like we haven't really stopped. We, got a whole album written and recorded within a couple months. And and then this upcoming year will just be a whole brand new wave of, a new album where it's me on bass. The songs we're playing on stage were written by me. It's a lot.
And with this being the Morning View Tour,
Mm-hmm.
is there a plan to just segue into a new tour off the new album, or how's that going to work?
With this should be the last leg of our Morning View Tour, as far as I know, unless, gets extended. You never know. But once the album is released, I think, we can all assume the natural process would be just a new album cycle, right? So all the things that you're hearing on the album mixed with like all the hits, and, just carry us on around the world again for however many years until we write a new one, which we're already eager to like get back in the studio this year. So
that's awesome. And so what has this tour been like for you now after you've been with the band for a year?
This tour feels very comfortable after being together for a year. Since, we re-recorded this album, it's all very familiar and tight, and almost has like a new air about it, like, my own approach to all the songs. I know the guys super well now, so, there's no getting to know each other at this point, it's all very familiar. And, now we have original music coming out very soon, and it just feels very tight and settled. Feels like like we've put in our getting to know you time in. Yeah.
And now it's just everyone's comfortable with each other.
Yeah, now it's just family. Yeah.
And what is it like playing the album? Because this has been a trend that I love,
Mm-hmm.
where Green Day did all of Dookie and American Idiot.
Mm-hmm.
Weezer did the Blue Album in its entirety, and there's this trend now of, hey, we're going to take our biggest album in its entirety. What is it like for you to play Morning View in its entirety?
My favorite thing about playing an album in its entirety is, like when we used to listen to like, records all the way through.
Oh, yeah.
And you'd have that space between the songs where you already knew what was about to come, and you're like anticipating the song and you're excited, you know what I mean? And you almost memorize like the space between how long that is. You kind of get to experience that feeling when you're playing it live or hearing it live, you know what I mean? You already know what's coming next. It's not like, oh, I wonder what they're going to play or when they're going to play the song. And I feel like it's just a very nostalgic experience that adds that chunk to it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And how have you found the audience reaction to that?
They've been a lot crazier on this run. Like South America, for example, was wild. Like so many pits and so many, people just surfing their way up to the front, and just all the chaos, which I love. We want the chaos. You're playing something heavy, you want to see people like really feeling it in their bodies. And I think this run being, everywhere we've been with this Morning View album, has been the craziest for sure.
Now, you've talked about that you have a new album coming out. I believe it's called Something in the Water.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's things you can't say. What can you tell us about this album?
I guess sometimes when some of my favorite bands put out new albums, I get like excited and nervous because I'm like, I really hope this holds true to like what I know about them, and like, is like one step up from the last one that I had, because we're all very spoiled in that way. And that it also doesn't go too far away from what I know. That's how I feel, when my bands put out albums, but it stays in that line for me. It like checks all those boxes where it's like, it hits hard, and there's like the soft moments, the heavy moments, the really like poetic lyricism of B. And and it just, it covers all the ground there. So I think people are going to like it. So that's why I'm so excited.
And what was the recording process like for the album?
It was cool. It was very chill, very like how I've ever written anything with a group of friends. Mikey and I got in his place for, about a week, maybe a little more than that. And we just like spent, afternoons like in his living room, just jamming and coming up with tons of ideas, putting together a mess of voice memos, and, just very like rudimentary style of, writing songs. And then we all got together and, threw shit at the wall and pieced things together. And, it just kind of built in a very organic way that you'd imagine a band would write music. You know what I mean? Everyone was in charge of their own instrument. It was, everyone's ideas are welcome, and it just pieces together. It's not like one person's sound, you know what I mean? Which I think is a really special experience to be a part of and to see with these guys. Is they're all friends and all their personalities are welcome and they mesh, and maybe even if they rub, like they love each other. It's the same way when they write music, you know what I mean? So it's like everything's welcome, and we will make it, come together as like a unit, and it creates this unique sound that is Incubus.
And when you guys write, so some bands will have someone who's a primary writer. So someone like Mike will come in, bring an idea, and someone's in charge of lyrics. And then other bands have that, but also the band will jam together and things will come out of jams. Do you guys have any of that where you just kind of get in a room together, no one's really had an idea, or even if they do, you just say, let's just play together and see what comes out and see if you get inspired by something. Do you guys do that at all? Yeah,
it's kind of all the above, right? It's somebody bringing in like almost a fully finished idea, somebody bringing in a random idea, or us just in the room being like, nobody's got anything, let's just play. You know what I mean? And then you just kind of ride whatever wave you catch, in that moment. Mm-hmm.
And is there any jamming?
Like when we're writing?
Yeah.
Yeah, like a lot of ideas come from that, right? Like somebody will just kind of be fucking around, and then somebody else will jump in and start playing, and then, and it's really just kind of fueled by fun. You know what I mean? It's not like a stressful experience. It's all of us just kind of being musicians and being kids almost, and just freestyle flowing. And it doesn't feel like pressure. Like we have to sit here and write something. It's not like that. It really is just kind of jamming, and whatever feels good, you keep.
And which basses did you use?
Well, I think I would say I played my F bass a lot and my Marcus Miller, which those are just my go-tos. I'll play them for the most of the night tonight on stage. I like to use my familiar basses when writing, just because it's almost like something you can do with your eyes closed. You know what I mean? And it's like more of a outpouring that just kind of things just flow out rather than, taking like, there is something more to using like a weird, a bass that maybe I don't play as often with like some funky pedals to give me something to feel more creative with, or some like different sound. But for me, it's more of just like when I'm calm and not thinking, like stuff tends to pour out. So I like to use my familiar stuff.
And I noticed on your stage rig, you have a keyboard, key bass,
the synth,
right?
Yeah.
Synth bass?
Mm-hmm. The Synth 37.
Has that always been a part of your setup, or is that something specific for Incubus?
Yeah, it's kind of, I've used it on a bunch of things prior to Incubus. As like, my life prior to this, just like a hired gun. It's, upright synthesizers, electric basses. It's kind of something you have to do, background vocals, So I've always dabbled with them. I've always used them in my own writing. And with these guys, I'll barely touch it on stage tonight. It's just for a special moment. And
which one?
I almost want to surprise you.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess it's Umbrella.
Okay.
But yeah, it's on the record. But yeah, so it's something I've used with a lot of other artists too. And we use it in Incubus, like even like between songs, if I'm just like feeling, feisty and I want to like throw something in with Kill, while he's using all of his synthesizers over there, I'll just like start messing with mine. And, Incubus is a jammy band, they come from that kind of background. They like to play that way. So as opposed to working with, other artists in the past where it's strict, everything is the same every night, no wiggle room. There's, like create is kind of the vibe with these guys.
And I know you said you come from the background of being a session player. When you would get called, would people say specifically, can you bring your synth bass on this, or is this just something that you offer in, or you'll say, I think this could use some synth bass, and I can play that if you want. How does that sort of get incorporated in?
Yeah, it sort of depends on the their like musical director or the artist and what they're looking for that tour, or for the show or whatever. But a lot of times I just get calls that say, hey, can you do the bass for this? And they won't even specify, and I'll go listen to the music, and then I decide what needs to happen, like what I'm hearing on the record, or, if they want to have backing tracks, or, you know what I mean? Just whatever needs to happen live. Because sometimes things don't translate the same, on the record versus live. Sometimes you need something different. So I will usually make that ultimate decision, but I have been called specifically, hey, can you come in and definitely play synthesizer for 50% of this,
And you said this is sub 37?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my Moog makes great stuff.
Yeah, so much power.
Now, from your perspective, what is an Incubus show like?
From my perspective, super chill. Yeah, it's opposed to other bands that I've worked with, and maybe when I was in my 20s, it was just a different experience. But these guys are very they're surfers. You know what I mean? They have that surfer vibe. You know what I mean? So it's very much like that. Backstage, you guys will see it today. It's just everybody's kind of just low key, kind of wandering around, and there's not any chaotic pre-show raging happening. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like that when you walk on stage. You get up there and there's no tension. You know what I mean? And maybe that's what translates live for that feeling that people seem to get when they watch the show. But you watch B, his eyes are closed for half the set. He's just kind of feeling it. And the whole tour is kind of like that. It's just very calm, very deep feeling, Yeah,
well, I mentioned I'd had a chance to see you guys at the Garden, and it was really, there's the music element of the show, right? But if you're lucky, there's also, and I think I was describing to you as an experience. It was fun to watch you guys play.
Yeah.
Not because you're jumping around. It just, I don't know how to describe it. It's just fun to watch you guys having fun playing the songs, if that makes sense. I think that's what we all felt. That's
kind of what I think that's a really good way of saying it. Everybody is having a great time. Everybody really enjoys it on stage. And, I look over at Mikey and, we'll sometimes we're just cracking jokes too across the stage, or, we're really feeling the music and jamming, and everyone's very present. Yeah.
And what are your favorite songs to play live?
Phase has always been a big one. Nice to Know You. Oh, what else? Animali has become a major favorite. I don't know what it is. There's moments of, I love the bass part. I love the really climactic moments for the vocals. It's just a very high energy, powerful song. And for some reason, I feel that way, but every time the song ends, there's an uproar from the crowd that feels they're receiving that as well, which is cool.
We recently did a feature with Ben Kenney, and he said, and I quote, "Nicole's the best bass player that Incubus has ever had. She definitely has strengths that I don't. I'm a musician. Sometimes I'm a bass player, and sometimes I'm a drummer, and sometimes I'm a guitarist. Nicole is a bass player. She has a tremendous amount of respect for the instrument and the culture of the instrument, and it shows in her playing. No disrespect to Dirk or to me, but if you're going to get somebody who can do Dirk and me and still has something left in the tank, that's the player you want." A huge compliment from your predecessor. How does that make you feel?
Oh, emotional. It's so cool. Yeah, I did see that, and I reached out to him very quickly, and he just was like, "I'm just saying what's true." And I'm just, oh my God, overwhelmed with feeling from that, because it is a very feels like very large shoes. It is large shoes, you know what I mean? To come on stage with Incubus, which is it feels very bass oriented, you know what I mean? All the music and all the parts, and to be asked to do it, to be told that Ben recommended me for it, it's all just kind of a little overwhelming, because I feel like I will never from my own eyes see myself in that ranking with them, just because I that's just who I am as a person, I'm very grateful for every opportunity that I have and I'm still getting. And it's just very heartwarming to hear that. Yeah, it's cool.
It's nice to hear it read well. And given the whole background of what he went through, and I can't even imagine having to process the illness on one hand, leaving a band like this and an opportunity like this, and like you said, it's not just big shoes. You've described them as like somehow still friends. I think people need to understand how remarkable it is that a band that's been touring for over 20 years still wants to play together, still wants to be together, still gets excited to play together.
Yeah. I think Ben seems like he's thriving right now. And I really admire him in being able to see what he needed to do for himself. I think that that's a really hard decision to make. And, I might not know all the details, and I don't think any of us probably do, but to be put in a situation where life is really putting a lot on you, especially threatening everything that you hold dear, with like his hearing and everything. And then you can know what direction to go. That's a lot. I thought that was really impressive.
How much has Ben's playing in the band inspired your approach to the music?
A lot. It is also a large part of like a factor of growth for me too, because Ben is also like a wildly talented guitar player, right? So a lot of the things that he'll play, in any like live recording I'm checking out, especially, he implements like, some techniques or some approaches that maybe a guitar player would add to it. And it was sort of a challenge for me, you know what I mean? Because it's not just like my normal instincts. It like incorporate a lot of, like chords on top of things where like, throughout the entire song, like a lot of them, and they add so much girth and so much power that the song does need. And I think, the guys also really responded well to that. And it was something I really wanted to kind of, absorb and keep using in the live shows. And it was a challenge. It was like something new and fun to learn, for sure.
And what was your prep like for the role to come in?
Wasn't a lot of prep. I really didn't get a lot of heads up. When they hit me up to do it, I had just gotten off the road and I was super jet lagged, and I had like a day at home, and then I think maybe like a 2-day turnaround, and then I was in LA meeting up with them. So I went to Washington after my tour, and then I went to LA to jam with them. So it was more of like, let's just see if this sticks, like let's not really try to prep or adapt in any capacity. Let's just like meet and jam and see what happens. And so it was very easy. It was just like a quick little thing.
But once you met and the chemistry was there, what was your process of learning the catalog? Was it sitting with the record by record, or how did you do that? 'Cause it's a lot of songs to learn, a lot of parts to learn.
And even now, like we'll be doing sound check and they'll start playing a song and I'm like, fuck, I gotta learn that. You know what I mean? And it was tedious. I mean, I cared a lot. I really wanted it to be the nostalgic stuff and, the new versions that Ben plays, and, also not just knowing the record version, but knowing the live versions that they play, because they're kind of, they have some changes a little bit to the live versions. So it was very tedious. It was me coming out for rehearsals very quickly after, getting the green light to do it with them. And we'd go into rehearsal and, we'd go through everything that I knew and some stuff I didn't. And then I'd go home after rehearsing and just shed all evening, and learn as much as I could off of this giant list of songs. And it was mostly songs that were like, here's what we definitely play all the time. Here's what you should start with. So it was a lot of work at first. But anything, I've done it a couple times where I come in last minute for a band that's about to hit the road. And you want to get everything as prepared as you can very quickly so that anything else that needs to happen, like, just like melting into, the vibe with everybody kind of needs time to happen. You know what I mean?
Sure. You want it to be natural.
You want it to gel. Yeah. Feel very natural.
And did you transcribe from the records, or did they send you stems?
They sent me a folder of like live shows, like recordings from live shows.
Multi-tracks or just the mix?
Just the mixes from the shows. Because, just for like song forms and stuff like that were different than the record. And that's what I used.
Because we were talking before just about different players that had come in to replace other players for one reason or another. And we've done some interviews with players who did that. And the reason I ask is because they've sometimes answered that question referencing stems that were sent. So they'll say, oh, I noticed, they sent me the stems. I noticed there was this effect on this track and there was this effect on this track. So I was curious if you were just doing this by ear from the record or if they had actually sent you like individual stems. You could hear the isolated bass tracks.
Yeah, I've been in that situation before where I get stems, but not with these guys. It was more like, here's the forms, do your thing, And that was fun, because it wasn't, something I could like really dissect and hear, from the ground up. It was like, what am I hearing? And let me trust my instincts and kind of, create this naturally. And yeah.
And Dirk and Ben are obviously two very different players and writers. What do you take from each of them?
From Dirk, let me see. What I try to grasp, I say try because I'm still trying, from him is his like, the technique that he plays with. It almost has this like, his like very clean sound, but really heavy. Like he's a heavy hitter on his bass is what it sounds like he's doing.
A lot of attack.
It's his like his tone on his instrument, So without going and like getting the same gear, I like to try to kind of emulate that the best that I can. And that's something I'm still kind of approaching and still being myself while like, being like, oh, let's get like, this grimy like aggression that he has to his playing, And then with Ben, it's just, he is so melodic. And like I said, almost like guitar player approaches to certain things. And incorporating those two is like a really, really good coupling, in my opinion. Because it's very like, heavy bass and then beautiful, like ways of, empowering that like grime. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it really does.
Okay.
And now you've mentioned that you really feel connected now and in your place here in the band. So how much freedom do you feel you have now to sort of stretch out and make some of these things your own?
Yeah, I'd say a lot of freedom. I feel that because the guys, they've really told me, we like your playing, we like what you do, just do you, and if I do something they don't like, they're going to tell me. So it's like, it's a lot of comfort, it's just, do your thing. And if it doesn't work, everyone's going to collab, so, but at this point playing live, I feel very comfortable in the fact that I could try something and, everyone's going to welcome the creativity,
And is part of that also just having the time to, because you've done a lot of sideman work. Mm-hmm. And I feel like with a band like Incubus and a catalog this deep too, you probably have to do a number of reps before you feel like not just comfortable with the people, but just yourself musically, comfortable with the music to feel like, okay, now I'm really comfortable. It's natural for me to play. I'm reacting. So now I can actually react more than think about the set.
Yeah, I think when you internalize, because, you can internalize a song very quickly, but when you're put into a situation where you're playing live and there's so many, every night sounds different in your ears and there's moving parts and someone, everybody's having like a different experience. Settling into that, I feel like takes a little bit longer, And once you kind of get into that, like, I'm comfortable here. This is my experience. This is my band. I'm playing our music. When you kind of get into that space where you're doing this together, then it kind of opens up the floor. You know what I mean? You're not thinking about anything. You're so used to every scenario. Yeah.
And how locked in do you feel with Jose after a year playing together or so?
I feel very locked in. I wonder what he would say. Yeah, no, I feel very locked in with him. He's a really fun drummer to play with. He has like so much energy. He leans in and he's so consistent. You know what I mean? Like he's always on the money all the time. And so it's a fun like challenge to find to be as locked in as he is all the time. Really, like not waver. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what's been your most memorable show so far with Incubus? And if you can't pick one, more than one, but just any number of shows that stand out.
At this point, they all kind of bleed together. You know what I mean? But I'd say the one that always pops into my mind is the very first show we played together. We did, I think it was 2 nights at a casino. Oh, what was it called? Oh my God. It was in just outside of LA. Shit, I can't remember the name of it, but I'm sure you'll find that somewhere. But yeah, we did 2 nights there. It was my very first time playing with them. And it was just overwhelming joy and, you know, wanting to like really dial it and like get it perfect. And it's just kind of like so much prep. And then you do the show and then it's like, oh, we did it. Okay, first one's out, you know. That one always sticks with me, but all of them are so fun.
And what's your pre-show warm-up like?
I usually will just warm up my hands doing something really simple, like left and right, you know, like isolated exercises. And then like with a metronome, you know what I mean? Just to kind of get really rudimentary. And then once everything's like stretched out and warmed up, I'll just sort of jam. Like I'll just find some like groovy bass lines and, you know, kind of not think and sort of try to find that where people like meditate, you know what I mean? I feel like I try to create the feeling that I want to have on stage. You know what I mean? So before there's a crowd, before there's any responsibilities, you just kind of want to find that like that flow state. You know what I mean? I'll try to get there the best that I can in a green room before I, you know, go out on stage.
And having done a lot of Simon work before,
Mm-hmm.
How do you describe your experience? And again, it's going to vary by the music of the band too, but just there's such a difference between playing an arena and playing, let's say, like a packed club or even like a packed theater.
Yeah.
So how do you react to those different situations?
Yeah, I get so much more nervous in a tiny little club, for sure. You get much more of like a back and forth energy exchange in a venue like this, you know what I mean? But I don't know, some of my most memorable life moments of playing were in tiny little clubs, you know what I mean? Because there's no ears, you know what I mean? The drums are making your eardrums ring, you know what I mean? It's very like energetic and powerful, and you're really close to the people you're playing with, and that exchange is really powerful too. So I definitely wouldn't choose one over the other. I love them all, but they're different. You know what I mean? Sonically and crowd-wise.
What are you just listening to in general for fun right now? Like what's inspiring you?
I just yesterday, have been like working out to D'Angelo again, which people seem to think is weird, but I like, get like energized by
Well,
that
working
kind
out
of
on the
music.
bass or working out?
No,
workouts?
like in the gym. Yeah. And then Leanne LaHavas has been somebody that I've just been obsessed with. I actually use her music to do like vocal warm-ups and stuff too. So it's a lot of like, you know, that like soulful R&B. Yeah.
And then last question, if you could play with any drummer that you haven't played with, who would it be? And it can be more than one.
Any drummer. You know, I actually can't think who I would want to play with off the top of my head. It would probably just be like one of my local drummer friends, like back home, honestly.
Well, someone you haven't
like
played with before.
Oh, man. This is hard. Who would I want to play with? You're kind of stumping me right now.
It's funny because like I have a list of people I would play with.
Yeah, I don't really have that. Like somebody asked me the other day, if you could bring someone back from the dead to play with, who would it be? And these kinds of questions, like I never can like think of who I would want to.
I mean, there's so many options, but if I had to bring someone back from the dead, I'd want to play with John Bonham, I think. I just want to feel that. I just want to feel what it's like to have that drum kit behind me.
That's a good one. Yeah. You know, I can't, honestly, I'm not thinking of anybody that's like really feeling like where my heart's at.
So, you know what's funny is that for some reason that question tends to get that answer.
Really?
Yeah.
Good.
I've
Okay,
only asked
cool.
it a couple times, and each time I've gotten it. And what's funny is I got a text like a week later from the person I asked it to, and they were like, "The drummer from Krungbin."
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. Yeah, I try to be really, in interviews, what I've learned is if I'm not like honest, it like bothers me later. Like if I just say some shit to say some shit, you know what I mean? So like, yeah, no, I can't think of anybody that's like grabbing me right now. But when it comes, I will text you.
Okay. Perfect.